Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Um, for those who are here in person, please feel free to at any point unmute yourself and ask any questions that you have. For those who are going to be watching this recording, please feel free to email me or comment in YouTube any questions that you have, and I will absolutely get back to you. But without further ado, I'm going to start the presentation. I'm going to share my screen. All right, so welcome. We are going to be talking about crafts and things that we can create specifically for birds to attract them, to conserve them. But for those who do not know me, my name is Marissa, and I run a little business called the Art of Ecology, which is designed to build visual connections between people and the natural world. So to be able to see and be a part of, so that we can have a better understanding and appreciation for the natural world around us. And when we get to do things hands-on and we get to see and experience the natural world up close, that's when we can really connect with it. We can build a greater understanding of it, as well as start to have a sense of responsibility for the ecosystems that we are a part of. And I do all of this through presentations virtually like this one, as well as in-person programs and events. And I get to, with my more creative side, get to raise some awareness and conservation efforts through original art and book sales as well. So I have here a list of upcoming programs that I am running. Some are in person. I have one in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, as well as one in Chester County. So I'm kind of all over southeastern Pennsylvania at this point. And then I have 2 virtual presentations coming up similarly to this one. The next one in February is about indoor gardening and the benefits that houseplants can have on our mental and physical well-being, especially during the winter months. And then a foraging course that I will be teaching through Delaware Valley University's continuing learning, their retirement program, but it is for anyone who is able to participate around the world. So I would love to see you at a future event. But today we're talking again about crafts for birds. So in order to really understand why we are going to be making these projects and how to make them the best they can be, where to put them so that we can maximize their impact, we need to kind of understand a little bit about birds to begin with. So we'll take a look at what triggers migration, especially because we're looking at winter birds this time of year. We will look at how to identify them, both by sight and a little bit by sound. We'll take a look at a handful of local winter birds that are going to be really common at our feeders or in our backyards this time of year. And then the last half of the program will all be about what projects we can make at home, in the classroom, with friends, with family, wherever, that are specifically designed to conserve or attract birds. All right, so let's start with migration. Here on this map, we've got a diagram of the various flyways, and these flyways are just pathways that birds take from one area to another, and they tend to stick to those geographic regions. So here, where I am located in southeastern Pennsylvania, I am along the Atlantic flyway. However, there are the Mississippi, Central, and Pacific flyways, as well as part of the North American flyway system. But I'm not going to be seeing birds from the Pacific flyway here in Pennsylvania. These pathways are really important because it's going to dictate what birds we see and when. So a lot of people think that migration is caused by temperature changes, because we think of, oh, winter migration is starting to get cold, birds want to be warm. so they'll fly south. Or, oh, it's spring or summer, birds are going to be flying back north again. They're going to be coming back to the area. But that is not necessarily what actually triggers migration. Indirectly, it is. But migration is actually triggered by access to food. So in winter migration, which is going to be starting in this region, we'll see it starting around September, continuing through early December. Birds in the Arctic Circle or northern Canada are going to start flying south. And if we think about it in terms of, well, what if you are a fish eater and now all of your lakes are frozen? So you need to fly to another area where they're not frozen anymore so that you can access your food again. So yeah, it is mildly temperature related because the water has frozen. However, it could still be really, really cold. The same degree temperature that it was where they came from and where they flew to might just have more rivers. So now the frozen lakes don't exist anymore. It's flowing rivers that, because the water is moving, it's not going to freeze over. And even if it's super cold, super icy, super snowy on land, the birds still have access to their fish as their food source. So they'll only fly that far. And then maybe it gets super, super cold and now the rivers freeze over and they'll continue to fly south, but they'll only go as far as they need to find their food source. But it's not just fish. Birds are going to be flying to search for seeds or fruit or bugs, anything that they need to be eating. But this also means that migration does not occur in every species. Some birds will just change what they eat and they'll say, you know what, I can't find my bugs anymore. And bugs are really high in the protein that I need to be able to feed my young during the summer. But in the winter, I need fats to be able to insulate myself and stay warm. So I don't want bugs anyway, I want seeds. And they switch over to a seed-based diet and they don't need to fly or migrate anywhere. Their food source is still at the same spot. So that can help us understand what winter birds are going to be eating. Again, we've got seeds, we've got fruits, we've got nuts. In terms of the plants that we just have growing wild, birds are going to be definitely utilizing grass seeds, native grasses, flowers such as goldenrod, coneflower, asters. We may see them in meadow areas. Any sort of flowering plant that produces a seed is going to be wonderful food for winter birds. But we also have fruit. And while we don't necessarily think of winter when it's all covered in snow as being a fruit season, there's still plenty of plants that hold on to their fruits for as long as they possibly can and rely on birds to disperse the seeds in that fruit. So for example, here we have the American robin is enjoying the fruits of a crabapple tree. And these crab apples and many of the fruits, such as the rose hips or the staghorn sumacs, those little fruits really require a frost, a freezing period, to kind of make the sugars found within the fruit more bioavailable to the bird. So they taste a lot sweeter and therefore are yummier and more attractive to the birds after a first frost. So the trees want to hold on to their fruit until they're as ripe and as delicious as possible. And then the birds come picking at them. They love it. And now the birds are going to help disperse so baby crab apples can pop up in more areas now. Then we have nuts. Here in Pennsylvania, we've got walnut trees, hickories, pecans, all sorts of nut trees that many birds and mammals definitely rely on. These larger birds, such as woodpeckers, or here we have a blue jay, they have bigger, thicker, chunkier beaks that can break through the shells or the holes. A lot of oak trees rely on birds and mammals to be able to break through those holes in order to then germinate properly later on. So that's all the wild stuff, but we can easily be attracting birds based on what they want to be eating this time of year with feeders that we put up to supplement their diets. And adding feeders can be a great way to attract birds to your area. So I have this window here in my office, and I'm on the second floor, so I can't necessarily put a feeder outside to watch the birds, but it's a great way to attract birds so that then I could watch them and learn more about them. Maybe the first floor people can do that. And I can put up a variety of different feeders in order to target as many birds as possible, because the birds are eating different things and they're requiring different things based on what they are doing. Are they still migrating through? Is this just kind of like a rest stop as they continue? Or are they staying here and they really could use the supplement in their diets? Because maybe, as I mentioned, I'm in an apartment on the second floor. The habitat quality here has diminished due to the development of the area. There's not as many of those goldenrods, the asters, those nut and fruit tree species around for them to enjoy. Black oil sunflower seed is probably the most attractive out of all of the different seeds that you could buy at a grocery store or a hardware store, pet feed store. These attract sparrows, woodpeckers, cardinals, finches, all sorts of birds. But then you can have different types of seed. For example, Niger is a thistle. It's a type of thistle, so the seed is very, very small. And small finches love to eat the thistle. So by putting out different types of seeds, you can actually attract different species of birds. There are many birds that enjoy fruits. And while most of these birds are going to be birds that we see in the summer, like our Baltimore Oriole that flies through here loves fruit, but we're not going to see them this time of year. They have migrated on. But putting them out, especially for woodpeckers or sparrows to kind of pick at as they want, is a great way to provide minerals and vitamins, which is still necessary for the birds to be able to survive. It's usually pretty sweet, so it can give them, it's more like a, ooh, I have dessert here as compared to your seeds or your suet. And suet is a fat-based food source. Here in this picture, you can see these chunks of what is just fat blocks. However, you can get a suet block at a grocery store that's more of a lard base with seeds and fruit mixed into it. But woodpeckers love it. They love to peck at this hard substance and pull off bits of it to enjoy. Because woodpeckers love it, you might be able to find some suet blocks that actually have mealworms or other insects dried and in the suet block. So the birds are really getting the sort of food that they love. But in the winter, it's just great to be providing them with these high calorie foods like the seeds and the suet. These calories are going to put like a nice little jacket on them, like a little layer of fat that helps to keep them nice and warm and insulated, as well as giving them the energy if they need to continue migrating. They now have a lot of energy stored up within their bodies to be able to fly these long distances. So we've got our feeders that we've got set up. And now we want to figure out how to identify them. Easiest way to do that is by sight, right? There's lots of things that we can focus on. We can focus on beak, feather, body size, shape, style, color, all sorts of things. And if I were to ask what bird this image came from, just by looking at it, even though it's a tiny, tiny sliver of a picture, it's not the full picture, many would be able to accurately guess what bird this came from. And many might even be able to say what part of the body these feathers were on, because they are so iconic in color and in shape. That round circle green portion with the weird little blue kind of hoof print mark in it, with those copper tones, that is very, very iconic and very striking. This is the tail feather of a male peacock. So just by sight, we can start to identify birds. But this can also be very challenging because the male and the female birds might look very different. So you might be seeing an American goldfinch, but it doesn't look yellow at all. And it doesn't really have bright coloration. Well, maybe it's just the female, right? Could also be due to different stages of life. For example, the bald eagle, very recognizable, America's bird, right? It has that white head that's very iconic. However, that white head is a mark of the bird being an adult. They will only get those white feathers once they have reached around 5 years of age. So we can be seeing a bald eagle that's completely dark brown, and it could just be a 2-year-old or a bird that is still in its juvenile stage of life. On top of that, there could be seasonal plumage changes, right? I talked about the sexual dimorphism, or the differing appearances between the male and female birds. The American goldfinch male is super vibrant. The female's a little dingier, not as vibrant. However, the male does not want to be that vibrant in the winter. He's not trying to attract a mate at that point. So he's like, oh, I don't want predators to see me. They will molt and have a dingier seasonal color in the winter to kind of blend in with their surroundings a little bit more. Now, this is not every bird. Cardinals are super bright red, they're vibrant, they're gorgeous. The males don't molt and look dingier in the winter. They're just bright red all the time, which is great for them. But because there's all these different factors, it can be a little tricky to just immediately identify a bird by sight. So we can combine the feather colors with things like, well, what shape is the beak? How big is the body size? What color is the beak? That can help too. We can combine them with other identifying features to get an accurate idea of what bird we have in front of us. Typically, for me, and when you would get a field guide, you will have notes on identifying the bird based on the feathers, the beak shape, and how large the body is. In fact, you may see little silhouettes, like I have here, of the birds in the book, and they'll compare it to other birds because we have a general idea of how big a crow or a robin is. We kind of have that idea. And so it might say, oh, this house sparrow is this big, and they'll have a silhouette of a robin next to it. So you can see that the house sparrow is, this size, and the robin is this size. So you can start to get a better understanding of comparisons between the birds. If the bird is flying way up high, you might be able to look at the silhouette of the bird as it's flapping its wings overhead of you. And just by the shape of its wings, you can start to get an understanding of, oh, is this a raptor? Is it a carrion eating bird, like a vulture that doesn't need to be fast and zippy? It just needs to be able to glide so it can be smelling for all these dead things. Or is it a super, super flappy bird? It's flapping 8 million times because it's so small. Might be a sparrow, right? We can also be looking at the beak. Not only do different birds have different beaks just because they're different species, but they have them because beak shape denotes what the bird eats. That blue jay with its chonky, thick beak, that's built for crushing. Whereas a finch has tiny, delicate, almost more tweezer-like beak that's designed for picking thin seeds out of thistles. You may have a woodpecker with its long but sturdy beak that's designed to chisel and hammer. Or you might have a bird like the hummingbird, who has a very, very thin, long beak that's designed like a straw to be able to suck up nectar out of flowers. So being able to look at the bird beak and the shape of it not only is going to help you identify the bird, but also what it eats, and therefore what different types of foods you should be putting out for it. You'll also want to be able to identify birds by sound because you may not see the bird in its habitat. They have a really great job at hiding. Many of them are so camouflaged, they'll be down in the leaf litter. It can be really hard to see them, but we can hear them. We hear their songs, they're communicating with one another. They might be saying things like, oh, there's something really dangerous here, guys. Everybody, there's a big human. It might be a predator. Everybody watch out. Watch your nests, everyone. And it can kind of call to one another to warn them that something scary is around. Or they might be saying, hi, look at me. I'm a vibrant male. Ladies, aren't I so handsome? These are the kind of things they're communicating. And we can listen to those calls and say, oh, this one is making a different noise than this one is. It's kind of like me being able to say that if I am sitting facing forward and there's people talking behind me, I can pick out my best friend's voice and be able to say, oh, Anna's back there. And my husband, Zach, is over here. I can denote the differences and hear that. Or I can realize that my dog has a different bark than the dog across the hallway. So even if I'm in the hallway, not even in the different apartments, but I hear the two dogs barking, I can tell which dog is which just by sound. And we can do that with birds too. Just takes a little bit of practice because it's like learning a new language. So as we go outside or we're sitting in a classroom or an office or a kitchen table and we're hearing bird songs, we can be listening for the whistles or the chirps or different patterns of hammering from a woodpecker. And it can be really easy for us to start being able to relate to the sounds and to kind of pinpoint them by substituting words for the songs. So for example, I might hear as the whistle. And eventually I can say, oh, I hear the tea kettle bird. And I know that the bird that goes tea kettle, tea kettle, tea kettle is the Carolina wren. Even if I don't see it out there, I can identify it. Or I might hear, I can start to substitute words for it. And many times there are common phrases associated with the sounds the birds make because that's where they get their names from. The chickadee is known for its call that sounds like it's saying chickadee-dee-dee-dee-dee, chickadee-dee-dee-dee-dee. And we can start to identify birds that way. There are lots of tools to help you identify birds by sound because like I said, this can be hard to do. It's like learning a new language. You need some help. Merlin is a great app, free app on your phone that is done through Cornell Lab of Ornithology. You can also use it on desktop or your computer, tablet, things like that. And you can listen to bird songs on there. So as you're hearing your bird, you might be able to record it and then say, what bird am I hearing? And they'll give you a suggested list. You can use the National Audubon Society. They have a database of birds. That would be more for your desktop or your computer. Phone, Merlin is really great. They have all sorts of life history information, identifying features, as well as a huge song database where you can listen to the 20 different calls of the cardinal, right? Something on your phone might only give you the one or two most common sounds. iNaturalist is a really great app for identifying living organisms in general. However, there is a place where you can upload your recordings. So if you're out in the field or you're sitting by the window and you can record what you're hearing, you can upload that to help you identify the bird. And eventually, you will be able to kind of stack these word bites in your brain and be able to call on them. And you will learn eventually, so that when you're out at night and you hear, "Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you?" you can get excited because there's a barred owl nearby. It's great, right? Or if you hear the quirr of the red-bellied woodpecker, you know, oh, I need to be looking up the tops of the trees, not down at the forest floor, because I know where this bird lives. There is also something, I have this, if you can see the screen, my little recorded image here, I have something called the Backyard Birdsong Book. This is produced by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology in Merlin, and it is very helpful. It's a wonderful book for being able to get the life history of various bird species. However, there's also a song kind of database where you can plug in the numbers associated with the bird on whatever page and play its recording. So it's really great for a classroom or for a studying sort of environment where you're trying to really sit down and get to know the bird songs. And you can start testing yourself by playing various songs and then seeing if you can identify what bird does what song go to. It can be a really great way to test, so you can take your knowledge out into the field with you. Now we're going to talk about identifying just a handful of common winter birds that are going to be really quintessential in this area. First, we've got our downy woodpecker. This is the smallest woodpecker in this area and very easy to identify. You have sexual dimorphism represented here, which is the visual difference between males and females. And in the bird world, males are the shiniest, the prettiest, the coolest looking, most vibrant. And they, as seen here in this picture, have a little splotch of red. The females, seen in the other picture, do not have any red on them. The way to differentiate between a downy woodpecker and a very similar woodpecker, the hairy woodpecker, is to look at the tail feathers. And here on this female, you can see the tail feathers really, really well. You see those black, thin ones with white tail feathers underneath. And on those white tail feathers, you can see black spots, black polka dots. The downy woodpecker is the only one that has those. In the hairy woodpecker, they do not have those polka dots at all. So that can be a really helpful way to differentiate between the two if you're not quite sure about the size comparison, because the hairy woodpecker is a little bit bigger. But unless you see them side by side, it can be really hard to tell. And now we can identify it by sound. So I'm going to try to play this. I hope you can hear it. Okay. So the downy woodpecker has that quick chirp followed by a series of trills. Tufted titmouse. Here we don't really have a lot of sexual dimorphism. It's very difficult to distinguish between the male and the female. However, they all have the gray back, whitish, tannish tummies with cinnamon color underneath their wings. That black spot right above their beak is the primary coloration distinguishing factor. All tufted titmice have this, but there's a lot of different titmice species out there. These guys have that black spot. They also have the tuft at the top of their head. I'm going to try to play the tufted titmouse for you. And as you listen to the song, it could be the sort of thing where you're saying, I have no idea what sound the tufted titmouse makes. But then when you hear the sound, you might be like, oh my gosh, I actually have heard that, just never put the two together. Quick little whistles. Then we have the black-capped chickadee or the Carolina chickadee. And the reason I put a backslash there is because we are in my area, here again in the kind of southern portion of Pennsylvania. We are right along the range between the Carolina chickadee, who this is their northern range, and the black-capped chickadee, who this is their southern range. And they have the ability to breed with each other, produce viable offspring, which are called hybrids. These hybridized chickadees are really common in this area. But if you're on kind of the outskirts, you might be able to distinguish between the two individual species. The black-capped chickadee is going to have a more olive or a grayish green tummy. The Carolina chickadee has much starker contrast between the black, the white, and the gray. Like I said, these are very iconic. Their song sounds like what their name is. Then we have the red-bellied woodpecker. This is going to be kind of the medium-sized woodpecker in this region. They have a red cap, although it's not a full red hood. That's the red-headed woodpecker. This is the red-bellied. And you can see the sexual dimorphism. Here we have the female whose red kind of stops at the very top of her head. And the red on the male extends all the way down the face to the beak. But otherwise, they both have these creamy, whitish tan tummies and black checkerboard tail feathers and wings. This one is not found in my backyard birdsong book. However, they are known for their quirrs, Kwirr, which sounds like quirr, way up high in the trees. We have the dark-eyed junco, and then this one and the next bird that we talk about are ones who do migrate. These guys come from way up in northern Canada, Arctic Circle area, and migrate down for the winter. And this dark-eyed junco here is the first bird that I learned how to identify by sight that I can like really remember being told, and it was the gray bird who sat in milk, and he has the cute little pink beak. This is pretty iconic. This bird has a pink beak. That's really cool. A lot of the others have darker colored beaks. Here in eastern United States, the dark-eyed junco is gray with a white tummy. However, in the western United States, the same exact species looks a little bit different, and it's a little more red colored. We can listen to the junco. See if you might have heard this guy before you saw him, but he's a very common winter bird. There's a lot of birds in here. Much more of a fast-paced chirp or trill. Finally, we have our white-throated sparrow. And just like the junco, they can have a different coloration, but it's not necessarily based on geographic location like it was with the junco. Here, even in Pennsylvania, we can have a white morph or a tan morph. And how we can figure that out is by looking at their eyes and right above them. All white-throated sparrows have that little patch of yellow right above their eyes. It's like a nice little eyebrow. And then it fades into another color. On the white morph, it's a very stark white, snowy white. And in the tan morph, the yellow is a little dingier. It's more of a brownish yellow, and it fades into a tan rather than a white. And this bird sounds like this. So hopefully, as you are out and about, you can start to pick out individual bird songs and start to understand what song goes with what bird. And you can start to identify these bird species. And again, this is all to help us connect more to the animals that we share our ecosystem with, which will help us be more active and take more of a role in protecting and conserving these animals because they're pretty important species. Birds play a huge role in our ecosystem. As mentioned before, they are seed dispersers. So they are taking seeds from plants and moving them from one area to another. They also help with pest management. I personally am very thankful for woodpeckers. Bugs and insects are not my favorite creatures in the world. I know they have their role and their place in the environment, and they're really great. Sometimes they freak me out though, so I don't want them in my house. And insectivore birds, such as woodpeckers, help to manage the pests or that insect population and keep it in balance so that they don't get too extreme and then start to say, hey, we don't have enough trees to eat. We're going to move inside and eat homes. And I don't like that. So I'm very thankful for the birds like sparrows and woodpeckers who manage those populations. They also provide food for other wildlife. Hawks, raptors, fox, coyotes, snakes who rely on the eggs. Many, many animals utilize bird eggs as their source of food. So without birds, we would have a boom in pest populations and a bust in important predator populations that are also really cool. Who doesn't love raptors? They're amazing. They're also important as pollinators. I mentioned when I talked about the beak shape, the hummingbird. Hummingbirds are really, really valuable pollinators during the summer season. Here in Pennsylvania, we have two native hummingbirds, the Anna's hummingbird and the red ruby-throated hummingbird. They're important pollinators, and many other birds that are visiting our gardens, visiting our flowers, looking for seeds, are also moving pollen back and forth. So birds are a huge source of where we get our food from. So they're super important. However, on the downside, roughly 1 billion birds, and this estimate increases each year. This was put out in 2019, this number. 1 billion birds roughly die every year from human-related disasters. We've got hunting, fishing. You can see this diagram here. Pesticide application, wind turbines, cars, tension wires. But the top two reasons for bird deaths are very, very preventable. The second top cause of bird deaths here in North America is due to cats, to kitty cats. And this is primarily because cats have a job, they have a role in the ecosystem, and they're adorable little predators. Here in North America, though, as they get outside and they are no longer in our homes where they're domesticated pets, they play that role out really well, and they have become an invasive species in all of North America. They are non-distinguishing predators, meaning that they go after whatever they can catch, and are hugely responsible for the decline and extinction of many small animals, small mammals, and birds. Keeping your cat inside, if it's your pet, not only is better for your cat, it prevents a lot of disease spread. Your cat's not going to get hit by a car or get really hurt, get rabies, diseases, you know. So your cat's going to be safer, but so are these animal populations that do not know how to fight back or defend themselves against this invasive species of cat. Other programs such as spay and neuter programs, especially if your area has a problem with feral cat populations, this can be a really great way to kind of manage and prevent that feral cat population from growing out of control. So we can keep cats inside, keep our pets indoors with us, and that can hugely reduce the number of deaths in birds each year. But the number one cause of bird deaths is due to fatal window strikes. This kills so many. And I mean, I get it. Windows, it's hard to understand. I, as a human, have had issues with glass doors running into them. And if they're like cleaned really well, especially at grocery stores where it's like the whole entire wall, and I'm not paying fully attention, and I run into a door and I'm like, oh shoot. And then I pretend that no one saw that and I walk in. But if I, as a human, who my species designs the glass, builds the glass, puts it up, get confused, how would we expect an animal who has no concept of a window or a glass office building to understand it either? Many birds will think that they can fly through the passageway, that, you know, if I have my window here and on the other side, I have another window, they just see nature and then a weird empty space and then nature again. They think they can fly through. As long as they can get their wingspan through the grates or the panels or the walls on either side of the window, they'll think they can fly through. Or if they don't think they can fly through, they might see their reflection instead. And especially in male birds, this can be really bad because they have set up their territories. And if they see their reflection, this is really common with cardinals in spring and summer, they'll see their reflection and think it's an opposing male, and they'll start to fight their own reflection. This uses a ton of energy and causes extreme stress, and they ultimately can die, maybe not from collision, but from the fact that they can't get enough energy because they're spending so much time fighting. So fortunately, we can be using our creative minds to kind of protect birds, to conserve them. Window clings is a great way to prevent window strikes. It breaks up reflection. It puts things kind of in the way of the birds so that they're like, oh, I can't fit my wingspan between the flower and the pumpkin and the snowflake. I can't do that. They won't fly through and they'll look for a different way around. We can be providing habitat or nesting sites, especially in areas where habitat's low quality. We can create things such as native plant seed balls to restore the habitat, and it can be a very fun, hands-on way to engage with our ecosystems. We can set up bird feeders of all varieties. And another thing that we'll talk about are bird deterrents, which is not, attracting them, we're deterring them. However, in cases like a woodpecker coming and pecking at the siding of your house, or a cardinal who's fighting the window, the reflection that he sees, we want to get these birds away and to stop focusing on the building and to go back to their homes. So we might want to set up things that can mitigate their stress levels. So we'll start with the window clings, and we'll go through 6 different projects that we can complete. Window clings take about 10 to 20 minutes to make, plus the time it takes to dry them. You will need a sheet protector, puffy paint, toothpicks, a piece of paper, plastic knife, and you're going to want to set up your sheet protector in an area that it's not going to get bumped as your puffy paint dries. To make the window clings, all you have to do is take your paint and draw on your sheet protector with it. You don't want it to be too thick because that's going to increase the drying time. It's going to make things really difficult when you're trying to peel it off later. You don't want to make it too thin though, because if there's little gaps in the paint where the different colors or different pieces of paint don't connect, As you peel your window cling off of your sheet protector, it's going to be more likely that it tears in those areas where there are gaps in the paint. So using a toothpick or a skewer to kind of move the paint around and fill in gaps can be helpful. Once you've finished designing your window clings, you can set them aside to dry for at least 8 hours. So typically I'll do a couple of them in the afternoon and then I'll come back to them in the morning. If it is sticky when you try to peel your window cling off of the sheet protector, leave it to dry for a little bit longer. Especially in thicker areas, this can take 24 to 48 hours to fully dry. But as you're able to peel it off as it dries, it's going to be easy because they're sticky. So when you're peeling it, it might stick to itself. So as you peel, you can put a piece of paper between the part that's on the sheet protector and the part that's getting peeled back. So you're kind of folding your window cling over top of your piece of paper as you peel. That's going to prevent it from sticking to itself. And then you can just slap it up on a window wherever you would like. And you want to keep it spaced about 4 to 6 inches apart. And that's going to break up the reflection enough that birds won't think they can fly through. Oh, whoops, wrong way. All right, we've got fruit garland feeders. This is a great fruit feeder for birds, especially nice in the winter as we can decorate our trees with these cool edible garlands. These can take a little bit longer to make than the window clings, primarily because it takes a bit of time to poke holes in the cranberries and to thread the string through. But it's great for working with fine motor skills, as well as starting to understand patterns and colors. So great for math, great for fine motor skills, love it. It's also just really fun to do while you're sitting there watching Netflix. There's going to be a lot of dehydration time for drying the fruits. So once you've collected all the fruit you want to use, citrus rinds are really good, apples, plums, cranberries, they're all great, raisins. You're going to want those, all natural twine or string, a bead reamer or a hole punch or a skewer, something to poke holes in the fruit, duct tape, which will help you to thread the string through, cookie sheet, paring knife, and then your oven is going to be preheated to 175. That's degrees Fahrenheit. Then you're going to thinly slice the fruit and you're going to roast them. This is where the time comes in. Citrus, like an orange or a lime round, can take 8 hours to fully dehydrate. Apples, I roast for 6 hours, and plums or pears, I would roast for 5.5 hours. So this is kind of an all-day project. Cranberries, though, can remain fresh. Then you're going to poke holes in your fruit and gently thread it onto your garland. The bead reamer is really helpful for getting those holes in the cranberries. And if you tape the end of your string, that prevents it from fraying and makes it a lot easier to thread through. Kind of makes it needle sharp. And then when you're done, you have it the length that you want, you can hang it outside. This is a really great thing to hang. For example, this one is draped next to a feeder. In the summer, this has hanging flower baskets, but in the winter, it's a great spot for the garland. But if you have a tree or a shrub that birds also like to take shelter in, that can be a great place to hang up your garland. You just want to make sure that it gets removed when it gets moldy and old, because if the birds haven't used it by then, they're definitely not at that point, and it can spread disease. Then we have the bird deterrent, and you can use CDs. If you think of the back of a CD, they're very shiny. The sun will catch that shine really well and sparkle, and birds get very confused by that. So hanging a CD mobile out at an area where a woodpecker is pecking at your siding or near a window that a male cardinal is attacking, it can help to confuse the bird, and the bird will be like, what is this shiny, cannot handle, and it will avoid the area. Now, I do want to make note that this is kind of the first step to deterring the bird. The bird might get used to it and like come back. This is not a foolproof method, but it is a great first step because some of these solutions can be pretty harsh or aggressive to getting the bird to stay away. So this is a great safe first method before you go on to a little more extreme methods. Plus, it's a fun project and a great way to reuse old CDs or DVDs. So you'll need CDs, string, aluminum foil if you want to add to the shine. You want outdoor acrylic paint or oil-based Sharpies, and a long stick, a branch, bamboo rod to hang the CDs on, and a place to paint if you're going to paint a non-mess zone. Then you make the mobile. So you're going to cut out shapes with the aluminum foil and kind of glue on if you want. You don't have to. If you just want to paint with acrylics or draw on the CD with the Sharpie, that's totally fine. Decorate as you want, but make sure that some of that shiny surface is still blank to be able to catch the light. Then you're going to tie your finished design to the branch. So the middle, that hole where there's the hole in the middle of the CD, tie that to the branch or the stick to create this kind of mobile effect. And then you can add a final piece of string to act as a hanger. And then you really want to make sure you're not just putting them up willy-nilly, but you're putting them up purposefully because you don't want the birds to get too used to it. You want it to be kind of a jarring effect as the bird sees it in this area that it's been going to. And they're like, what is that? No. And that can really help. But there are other steps. This is a good first step. Seed balls are another great activity. And whenever I do this with camp kids or at a special program, and I tell the kids that we're going to be chucking these as hard as we possibly can, they all get so excited. Everybody loves throwing stuff. And that's the point of these. So you're going to create a soil matrix or the seed ball matrix using clay, coir, which is a coconut fiber, potting soil. And if it doesn't stick together as you roll it into a ball shape, a seed ball shape, you'll add a little bit of water, just a little bit at a time, to kind of compact that and help it stick together. You will also want native plant seeds. If you want all of your seed balls to be exactly the same, then it's really easy. You can just dump all of those things, including the seed, into a bowl, mush it up, roll them into 1/2-inch diameter balls and set them aside. But if you want a variety and you want 10 that have milkweed seeds and 10 that have sunflower seeds, or you're going to be throwing them in different locations because that side of the house is sunny and that side of the house is shady, so you need different plants in each. That's okay. Just make the soil matrix and then add the seeds on their own. You can gently poke the seeds into the seed ball matrix. If you have a large seed, like a sunflower seed, poke 3 to 5 in. That way they're not competing for space with one another. Or if you have a smaller seed, like a goldenrod seed or an aster seed, you can poke a couple more in, and you're not ramming it into the seed ball. You just gently poke it in so that they are held and kind of adhered to this soil ball. And when you are ready to quote unquote plant your little seeds, you take them and you think, okay, I have my sun plants and I have my shade tolerant plants. I'm going to throw these, and you chuck them really hard with all your might, chuck them into the general area. Because they come in these cute little soil packets, they don't need to be dug. And this can be actually a really fun way as you're driving down the turnpike and you see these wide swaths of empty space. You can kind of do wildflower plantings as you're driving along. Chuck them out onto the empty space on the side of the highway, and then later watch as these wildflowers grow up. But please be sure that you are using native plants and not invasive ones to your area. Then we've got these cool feeders. We've got first a pine cone feeder, and this is great for holding on to suet. The scales of the cone can be really, really cool to talk about how different evergreens and different conifers produce different looking cones and how their different structure helps the tree to be able to put out its seeds effectively. So pine cones are the best for this project because their scales on the cone kind of flare out a little bit. And that's going to be really helpful for holding on to the suet. So you'll want your pine cones, chunky peanut butter that has those peanuts in it. But if you're allergic to peanut butter, can't touch it, whatever, don't like the smell, I don't know, you can use vegetable shortening as well. You'll want seeds such as black oil sunflower. The yellow bits in this picture are corn and millet seeds. You can incorporate dried fruits or the mealworms. So you want all of your goodies, and then you'll put it all in a big bowl, stir it up with a big thick spoon. It's gonna be really thick, tough to stir. You want it all mixed together, and then use a small spoon, or I personally use my hands, and I just kind of adhere and smush this suet mixture into the scales of the pine cone. Then you wash your hands really, really well with soap after that. And then you are going to hang. So before you put the suet on, you want to tie your string around the end of the pine cone. That way you don't have to get it all messy, and it'll be really hard to tie on if you wait until the very end. But you'll tie a string to the end of the cone. That way you can hang it. And this is a really, really great project to hang like 10 in one tree and watch the birds come and feast on it. I specifically love these around the holidays. They look like little ornaments, and if I can get really round shaped pine cones, they look like fun ornaments that then the birds can come and enjoy. Then we've got our platform feeder, and this is really a diverse feeder. It can hold whatever you want it to hold. So to create this, I have 6-inch plastic plant pot tray. So what you would put underneath a plant pot to catch the water so your countertop doesn't get all wet. You'll want string, hole punch, and then an outdoor paint to decorate it if you would like. Fruit and seeds will be what we put inside. You are going to want to punch 3 holes so that they form an equal triangle. So when you collect, you're going to tie the string through those holes. So when you grab all 3 strings, it can lay flat, even, and balanced. So you'll want it to be kind of a triangle shape. Punch a hole each of those corners. You tie the strings together, and really that's all you need to do to create the feeder. So if you don't want to decorate it, this project takes 5 minutes. But if you want to decorate it, you can paint the outside only. You don't want to paint the inside, because if the paint chips off and then the birds eat it, that's not going to be great. Then you're going to fill it with seeds, dried fruits. Think of your non-candied fruit. So a plain raisin, a plain craisin, not a crystallized mango, right? That's too much sugar, that's too much processing. We don't want to feed the birds that. But if you have this available year round, you can put fresh fruits in it in the summer and watch the Baltimore Orioles go crazy with your leftover watermelon rides or a quarter of a grapefruit sort of thing. You can also put bugs in it, and that's just delicious protein. This also can attract other sorts of animals. If you put a sponge, an all-natural sponge, there's some really great plant-based ones that you can get at the grocery store, on Amazon, wherever. and you soak it in sugar water, you can attract bumblebees, hummingbirds, butterflies, and they'll sit there and they'll sip on the sugar liquid that's in the sponge. You just want to make sure that you clean this out on a regular basis, just like you would clean out any sort of bird feeder that you would buy. You want to make sure that the seeds at the bottom don't mold. You want to make sure that the sponge doesn't get moldy if you're doing that sugar water. You want to make sure that as you're feeding and enjoying the animals, that you're keeping them as safe as possible and you're not contributing to any potential illness or disease that they would be able to get. And all of these crafts are great ways to help supplement their diets, to help attract them to your area, because as we start to enjoy the birds, we can start to appreciate them more and understand how we are connected to the natural world around us. So with that, I thank you guys for joining me today. Does anyone have any questions? I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see if there's anything in the chat. Well, if at any point you do have questions or you want to reference this again, please feel free to reach out. My email address is mjacobs@theartofecology.com. You can also find this recording is going to be up on YouTube, so you can comment there as well if you have questions. And thank you so much for coming. I hope you guys are inspired to go out and create some awesome things.